I bought a couple of new Proxxons months ago. It's time I got them out of their box. Yes, hello, welcome to another video. Is this 4 weeks in a row? Well, it is 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I'm cutting it fine this week, folks. Yep, it's going to be an in-depth look with a quick texture and colour of the Proxxon long neck angle grinder that I've been using with such wonderful enjoyment since 2017 when I first got my hands on one. And I've often got questions in chat or in comments on the video about, well, what cutter are you using? How does it cut? Can you give us a bit more information about it? So today I'll show you what you get in the box and what you need to get in order to make it a wood cutting machine. It says on the front, if we go to the overhead camera, that it is for cutting, rough machining, grinding, fine grinding steel, non-ferrous metals, glass, ceramics, plastic, and for carving wood. Unfortunately, on the inside of the packet as it comes, you don't actually get very much for working with wood. So this is it. First time I've opened it from this delivery, as I said, some months ago. So, what have we got in here? Bit of foam. Ooh, a manual. Ooh, a catalogue. In here, the little Allen key for changing the cutters, and a metal cutting wheel and a grinding wheel, and something in German. Let's see. Oh, actually this one has come with something you could use for wood, a sanding disc, but we'll get onto that a little later on. Proxxon micromotor. Here we go. Finer and smaller than standard power tools. For a fine job you need a fine tool. There we go. With a Proxxon tool, it is the speed that brings power to your work, not the constant pressure. If you work carefully, you will have great efficiency and pleasure with your Proxxon. And indeed, that is an important point to make at the beginning. This is a lightweight tool with a 100-watt motor. You can burn this motor out if you don't let it cut at the speed that it spins and you've put pressure behind it. You've got to just leave it and let it do the cutting. So a few little points about it. Let's go back to the overhead. If you've been to one of my demos, you'll be familiar with these comments, but I always make sure that it's turned off before I plug it in, and I don't actually plug the tool in unless I've got it in my hand, holding the blade away from me and out of harm's way, just in case I've just knocked that switch. It's a very little switch, easy to knock. The cooling vents need to be left uncovered. In use, as I'm using the tool, I sometimes find my hand creeps up there and starts blocking them. So conscious effort to pull your hand down the tool handle and keep those uncovered. There are only two, so that's important. In terms of safe cutting and safe cutting speed, there is no speed control with this tool. It just cuts at the revolutions, which I believe are 15,000 revolutions per minute. As I mentioned the sanding disc in a moment. I have used the sanding discs. I find that it's spinning too fast. It would be great if it had speed control. If it had speed control, that would make it my ultimate tool, but it doesn't. There is a battery powered version, 10.8 volt battery. I don't have one that does have speed control. If you're looking for speed control on a tool about this size, then you need to go away and see if you can find a Merlin 2 anywhere. And we will talk about those in a minute or two, because I've got some Merlin 2 cutters that fit on a Proxxon. The Merlin 2, instead of being green, is red. The body is a little bit longer because it has a speed control dial on it. I've only ever seen one in the flesh, in the metal and plastic once. It's a little heavier than the Proxxon. Felt perhaps a little more solid, weighty, but as I said, I have been using the Proxxon since 2017. It's still going as strongly as it did the day I bought it. So I'll move on now to look at some of the cutters that you can get for this, and the ones that I use and the different uses that I use them for, and we look at some sample cuts. So we've seen that Proxxon provide it with a sanding wheel. I've got a couple here, 100 grit one, and oh, that's a King Arthur Tools one, that's the wrong one. So we've seen that Proxxon provide a new tool with one of these sanding wheels. I've had a go, as I said, with it. This is a 100 grit one. It's just too fast. I found it burnt the wood. If you're looking for a Proxxon brand tool to do some cutting with wood, then this cutter is a carbide tooth rasp. Has a slight curve to it, so you can use it for surface work and for edge work. They do go right to the edge, but it doesn't have any teeth on the back. This is a good general tool for stock removal and for shaping, and I'll show that in action in a moment. So those are Proxxon tools. Couple of Arbor tools here. Now this little 6-tooth saw blade is what I started out with, and when I started with the first Proxxon I bought from Axminster, it came with 2 of these. It came with the kit. You can resharpen these with a round file. I'll look at that in a moment with you. I find these are great for cutting wood while it's spinning. They're good for texture with the grain or across the grains perhaps, but right 90 degrees across it, there's quite a bit of tear out on some woods. Many of you perhaps will be familiar with this Arbor tool, the mini cutter, which goes on their mini carving machine. Now this, many of you will be familiar with the Arbor mini carver. This is the cutter that comes with it, 2 carbide teeth. It will fit on a Proxxon. Personally, I think it's just a little weighty, although it's not dissimilar in weight to the Rasp here, but because the Rasp has got lots of fine teeth, I think it doesn't put quite so much strain. I have seen Pat Carroll using one of these on a Proxxon, and I asked him, is it at the point of just about at its maximum limit, and he felt that it was. So I haven't actually tried this on a Proxxon, but that's the cutter I started out with. As I've said, they seem to be very hard to find now. So an alternative is this cutter from Rotarex. It's not dissimilar, 6 teeth. It's slightly thicker, and again, this can be sharpened with a round file, and I'll show you that now. So this is the file I use to sharpen my chainsaw blades. 4mm cutter, I think, and it's similar to the chainsaw. Find the angle in the tooth and just push forward. Obviously they are alternative directions, so this one is angled slightly differently in different direction. You might find it easier to turn the tool around, the cut around, and just so you're working in the same direction as you're sharpening. Then we can move on to another manufacturer that does 2-inch or 50mm cutters is Saber. They do these in a variety of grits: coarse, medium, fine and extra fine. This is actually an extra fine. They run similar price to the Proxxon, about £40 a cutter. You can get slightly different design with some little holes in, I think 6 holes, which allows you, as it's spinning and cutting, you can actually see through the cutter, as it were. So that's good if you want to see what you're shaping. But for this, again, this is something I would use to make some sort of grooves or slots or waves. It's similar to the Proxxon, that it's the same shape, slightly cupped, teeth right to the edge and on a face which is slightly curved with both of these cutters. So saber tooth. I've mentioned the Merlin 2, which is made by King Arthur Tools. They do a wider variety of sanding pads, 240 grit I've got, 120 and 60. The advantage of, as I said, the Merlin 2 tool is that it has speed control. And that speed control may be useful so that it's possible to use these sanding discs. They do rasps as well. Now the difference between the King Arthur tool rasps is that they have teeth on the face, teeth on the edge, and teeth on the back. So they cut on all three surfaces. They're flat in profile, not cupped or domed like the Proxxon one or like the Saber tooth one. This is the fine grade. I was able to get a set from the tool post before they closed. As you can see, they're not cheap, but 4 of them worked out slightly cheaper than the Saber tooth or the Proxxon ones individually. So fine, medium, coarse, and extra coarse. Now, as they go up in or down in grit size, I should say, the weight increases. This coarse one is quite substantially heavier than the green one. I haven't used these on the Proxxon, but maybe for today's purposes I might show you them all in action, and perhaps we'll hear how the motor works with them. So those are the cutters that I've got and that I've been using for a long time, until a new kid on the block arrived. And the new kid on the block is Manpa tools. Now, I first came across these at a workshop run by Nick Agar and Colwyn Way a year or more ago now, and the first Manpa cutters I saw were for rotary tools, 1/8 of an inch shank going into a rotary tool like a Dremel or can't remember the name of my other little machine that I used them in. But you can also get Manpa cutters for 2 inch, 3 inch and 4 inch angle grinders. They are not cheap. I've been fortunate to get my hands on several of these cutters, and the difference is that they have removable cutters. So they come with 3 cutters, so they're not dissimilar to the Arbor one. But in my hand they feel a bit lighter. I should probably be scientific, shouldn't I, and weigh them. Maybe I'll do that as for you at the end. Actually, they're quite similar. I think that's just a little heavier. Stay till after the credits if you want to see how much each of them weighs. But here we go. They have 3 cutters, carbide cutters, that obviously can be reversed or twisted round. Come with a little Torx spanner so that you can undo them and replace them. I've bought 8mm circular cutter, 6mm circular cutter, and here is a triangle cutter. Now, these don't get advertised on the Manpa site or suppliers as for a Proxxon. What you want to look for these, if you're interested in these and you want to get your hands on one, then you need to look at their 2-inch belt cutter Mark II. That's what these are marketed to fit. I have used their Manpa 2-inch belt cutter. It bolts onto a grinder, an angle grinder, in a not dissimilar way to the Arbor. Slightly different orientation than Manpa belt cutter has. It bolts on this way, but instead of having an auxiliary handle here, it actually has the auxiliary handle here. And I found that quite a comfortable position to stand in, to put texture onto a piece of wood turning. A little more comfortable for me than this way. That might just be personal preference. Right, so let's see some of these cutters in action. I've got a bit of wood on the lathe, and let's do it with this camera to begin with. So a bit of beech, and I'm going to it's been quickly turned. I haven't sanded it. I'm not going to sand the surface because I'm interested in seeing what the cut is like on each of these tools. It's going to take a little bit of time to work my way through all of them. I'm not going to bother with the sanding discs, but I'll start off with them in the order that I showed them to you, with the Proxxon tools. Well, the Proxxon Rasp. And give this new tool a try out. So I've got to get it ready for action. Let's get the cable tie off. Let's get the Allen key. Little button here you press and lock the spindle and spin it round. And drop the Allen key on the floor. Because I've left the filming of this so late, I'm trying to make it as easy to edit as possible. So I'm going to leave that in. Right. So here we go with the Rasp. Little washer that goes in. And then there we go. Now obviously these carbide cutters, they've got lots of different teeth on them. They should leave a reasonably smooth surface depending upon the grit of the cutter. Obviously the one that's going to leave the smoothest surface will be the one with the finer teeth, and I'll just show you a close-up of those teeth on this camera. So there is the Proxxon cutter, and you can see the difference in size with the teeth here. Much finer on that saber tooth tool. So get ready. I'm going to hold it in my hand before I plug it in. I've checked that it's turned off. It's turned off. Plug it in and just get my face shield on. Now you can alter where the guard goes as well. I generally have it angled a little further round, so I'm just going to do that. I'm going to turn it off at the plug before I do. Just need a little Allen key. 2.5 millimeters. Yeah. Okay. Now, when you move the guard, don't tighten this Allen key up too much. So just pass that round. Now I've moved it to there. If I go onto the overhead camera, so that I can use this part of the face. Otherwise, I'm losing some of the surface that I can cut with. Right, so that's done. Let's tighten it up, but not too tight. You don't want to split the plastic. And away behind the wood. Never on here when you've got this blade spinning, or back on your wheel, hand wheel. So I'm just holding it on the wood, letting it cut. Going for a little sort of wavy pattern in it. You can do scoop. Here is the Proxxon, and that's the Proxxon Rasp in action. Right, so the cutter that I want to show you now, and I'm unplugging the tool before I change it, is this one, the little Arbor saw blade, and that's the first cutter that I really used with this tool. I think I got this Rasp a little bit later on. So just take that out, put this back together. Now obviously with this we're going to get a different kind of cut altogether. The Rasp is more of a sort of an abrading cut rather than a saw cut. This is a little saw blade, so it should give us a little saw cut. so we can make straight lines with it. And we can make the cut deeper by holding it in the cut longer, or just running it gently over the surface. I'm not putting any pressure on this. So I think you can see from that shot we're getting deeper cuts. You can see the shadow much more clearly in those cuts than here, which is a more, as I said, it's sort of an abrading cut. Now I did give this a little sharpen, the blade. Let's turn it off. As I showed you at the beginning with a chainsaw file, just running it to touch up each of the teeth. It's cut generally well, but we can get better cut with a different cutter. So let's mark that one up. That was the Arbor saw blade, not this cutter. So Arbor, let's write saw. So as I say, I've not fitted this onto an Arbor before. I'm not that comfortable using something quite that heavy, although it might be subjective. Stick around to the end and we'll see what each of them weighs on the scales later. But let's, for the sake of completeness and hopefully answering any questions, what would it cut like if you used it? Let's see if we can answer those questions just by doing a little bit of texturing with each of these. Now I guess what you need to listen to is the pitch of the motor. Very light pressure, and that's the lightest I think I've ever held it against a bit of wood. If I put any sort of pressure on it, you can hear the motor increase its work rate. Doesn't like it. And we move on now to the Rotarex saw blade. So this is what I use in place of this blade at the moment because I can't get these anywhere. I have asked a show on the Arbor stand if they are discontinued. I'm told no, we think they're coming back, but there's just none in stock at the moment, but lots of people are asking about them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the rasps next to each other. So that we can do a closer comparison. There we go, that's in. Right, here we are. So I'm going to do it up against this Proxxon rasp. So remember, this is the same shape as the Proxxon rasp. Now blue. Now the coarsest of them, the purple one. Right, so I've got 3 Manpa cutters. They are essentially all the same. 6 and 8mm circles and little triangle. I'll put the 8mm as the largest of the cutters on, and but the other cutters I could have used either of the other circle or the triangular one, and it would give the same cut. I'll try to squeeze a little bit, leave a little bit of room for the triangular one, because it does cut in a different way, of course, being completely different shape. This one you're going to get half circles, or part of a circle being cut. And one thing to say about the Manpa cutters, and all of the cutters actually, the Rotarex and the Arbor as well, is that they have a limiter, so the rest of the tool limits how deep it can cut in one go. In terms of which direction to cut in, whether it's best to cut going forwards or coming this way, you'll see I've been cutting in both directions. If you've got a very light touch on it, you're not going to really get a problem with it wanting to run or skip across the surface. So this is the Manpa 8mm cutter, and just put that here next to the Rotarex. Okay, now perhaps you can see on screen that does look already much cleaner a cut. So let's talk a little bit about the cost of these. The Proxxon itself is around about £100. The Proxxon Rasp, £40. Saber tooth rasps, £40. The Merlin 2 King Arthur Tools rasps, about £40 individually, but you can get a saving if you buy the kit. The saw blades, the Arbor saw blade used to be 2 for about £15. The Rotarex has gone up to about £15 to £17 for 1. The Manpa cutters, the 2-inch cutters, work out round about, slight variation, between £80 to £100 when VAT and stuff is added on. Now, you don't have to spend £100 again each time you want to replace your cutter, because you just buy new carbide teeth for it. But with this tool, the one I'm putting on now, the triangular cutter, I've got 3 points on that triangle, so I can rotate them if they start cutting less than satisfactorily. With the circle ones, I can just turn them around a little bit of a turn to get a bit more of a fresh edge showing. So just going to use, I've got a tiny little bit of space left to use the triangular cutter. Let's see how this goes. So with this, you can cut very fine lines, or you can go deep. So I think I'll leave it like that for now. Let's unplug these machines, and I'm going to take this out of the chuck so that we can have a look at the quality of the cuts much more closely. Face shield can come off now as well. Oh. So let's see. If I'm looking at it now, obviously you're not seeing it as closely as good definition as I can see in real life, but we've got the Manpa cutters here. I'll go and take some photos of it outside in the garden and put those up so that you can see. But the best cuts by far, the cleanest, smoothest bottom to them, are the Manpa cutters. After that, probably looking at the Arbor carbide, second place. Saber tooth maybe third. Similar to the Proxxon rasp actually, and not too dissimilar from the green rasp from Merlin tools, or King Arthur tools. Progressively rougher bottom as we work through those 3 different rasps there, but for fast stock removal that's not a problem. The Arbor saw blade is not quite as good as the Arbor carbide cutter. It's not dissimilar though to the Rotorex cutter. Interestingly, I might have done a little bit of a poor sharpening job on the Rotorex, looking at some of the cut pattern in there. But I'll get it outside, get some better photographs for you to look at. So I've done a still photo of the different cuts, and you can see head and shoulders, the Manpa cutter cuts the cleanest. The Saber Rasp is pretty fine, pretty smooth cut, as you'd expect with something that fine and toothed. The saw blade cutters cut okay. The Rotorex, it looks to me like I haven't done a very good sharpening job of that one. You can see it's almost like a little scratch repeating, a bit like a little nick in one of the teeth. So I'll have to put some stronger glasses on to sharpen that next time. The green King Arthur Merlin 2 Rasp, that cuts a pretty clean groove as well. But Manpa, head and shoulders over all the rest. Well, so I hope that little run through of the different cutters was useful. The two that I use the most are the Manpa ones. I mean, the head and shoulders are the cleanest cut of any of the cutters that I've shown you. But I do also do quite a lot with the Rotorex blade, and I would with the Arbor blade if I had a sharper one. Because there's one area where I think the Rotorex and the Arbor saw blade is actually better than the Manpa cutters, and that's for doing texturing with the wood spinning. I find the saw cuts more pleasing to my eye. The Manpa cutter with its spinning cuts cleaner a little bit, but not as clean as when the wood's stationary, which I suppose makes sense. But I think for me, the fact that this is a slightly different shaped cutting tooth gives a little bit more irregularity or texture to the spinning piece of wood than when the cutter is just that circle or the triangle shape. So I'm just going to do a little quick demonstration of a rim with this and some colour as a reward for sitting through all that stuff. And don't forget the really riveting bit after the end credits, when you find out how much each cutter weighs. Woo! So interestingly, the worst surface you can see is here, from the tool marks of the quick skim across the top I gave it. And I'm going to use some paints that were kind of given to me by Lynn from Jo Sonja. Premium pearlescent acrylics, orange and purple. Might work, might not, but you've come to expect no different. Just doing it over the bare wood. So now I'm painting into the texture, so I'm painting into the left hand side of it, and as I'm turning it around I can see up here that it's not going into the other side, into this side always. So I can come up here and just look in at this angle here and put the paint into there, making sure it's covered all of that. I mean, not that it matters hugely, but it's something to bear in mind when you're painting a texture, that you've filled all of the texture in, if that's what you're going for. You know me, I like the paint to really cover the wood, the rim, and then have wood in the middle. Yes, I like the unevenness, the asymmetrical nature. That's the word, isn't it? Because nature isn't symmetrical, is it? Now I'm not sure how well this is going to work, this purple against it, but it might be a bit too dark. And I might have preferred to have done it with maybe an intermediate colour between the two. Because nature isn't symmetrical, is it? Now I'm not sure how well this is going to work, this purple against it, but it might be a bit too dark. And I might have preferred to have done it with maybe an intermediate colour between the two. What, a 3-colour gradient, Stuart? Surely not. Wow, this could be a 2-colour and black job, folks. I thought there was something missing. I had a very enjoyable evening last night, being earworm for Stephen Kervel over on his channel on YouTube. And I was asked the question, how many colours is too many? I'm still searching for that answer, as you know. This is a much stronger pearlescent effect. I think I gave a rather two facetious answers. One was, if you start with lots of colours and you end up with black, you've probably used too many colours. A good rule of thumb from the great Mick Hanbury, my colouring hero, 3 colours and gold. That's enough, or even 2 colours and gold. Yeah, I'm not too enamoured of the shift from the orange to the purple, actually. But as it's turning around, yeah, you can see that on the screen. We've got a sort of, oh, doesn't like focusing this camera today. We've got, although I'm painting in purple, you can see there's a lot of green coming through as it spins round. So that's the pearlescent nature of this colour. The orange's pearlescence is not as strong, perhaps lost a bit by it being against a black background. So at the moment this is not pleasing me almost in any way apart from the lovely shifting colour of the purple. Maybe it'll only have one colour, well, one paint, purple and green. Let's see, let's sort of shift that in. Now that's looking a bit more interesting to my eye, the two of them together. But where it's not working is this sort of rather harsh transition from one to the other. So I want to work on those areas, get that a little bit more purposeful looking, or deliberate even. Might be the word I'm looking for. Of course it's deliberate, I'm doing it thinking about it, I'm not just slapping it on. Honest. Now that's looking a bit more interesting, the transition from one to the next colour. Hasn't got the wow in the middle that I wanted. I wanted something a bit more pronounced than that. Interesting little bits where I've got a little bit of the orange cutting across. That's the wrong paintbrush to use with the orange. This is the orange paintbrush. Really very light, just softening one into the other. Am I pleased with it? Moderately. Moderately. It's moderately good enough for 23 minutes past 3 on a Saturday afternoon. Let's see if I can get a stronger sense of purple in some places around the edge. Let's completely ruin it now. Here's a not entirely grubby piece of kitchen roll. So a dollop in there, flatten it out so it's not going to just be a big blob on the surface. It's not quite dry yet, but I'm just going to drag it over. So the shape at the back is nothing too spectacular. Poor bit of wood. But just as a quick rough demonstration of the versatility, the smooth cutting power of the Manpa cutters. I hope that's been useful. But this is, well, little autumn colours, I guess. But the gaps between them are far too big. I need them much closer. But there we go. I had some fun, and I hope it was useful for you. So stick around, see which is the heaviest cutter. Place your bets now. Until next time, thanks for watching. Right, so I've just done a little session of recording, not recording, the weight of all of these. So, some interesting surprises. The Arbor saw blade is the lightest. He says, having turned it off, let's try again. That is 11 grams, so really very light. Followed by the Rotorex at 13 grams. There's then a big jump up to the Arbor two-tooth carbide cutter of 27 grams. Now, interestingly, the tool, the Rasp that Proxxon make, this red Rasp, is 32 grams, which would suggest that the makers of the tool are happy for you to run a cutter at that weight. So 32 grams for that. The Saber tooth one is a little under that at 26 grams. And then I've got the Merlin 2 cutters. So we're looking at 32 grams as the sort of maximum. 24 for the green, 28 for the blue, 33 for the red. So they're getting a bit heavier, and 35 for the purple. So remember, our benchmark is 32. Now the Manpa cutters, let's start off with the triangular cutter. 22, so 10 grams lighter than the heaviest one that I've got from Proxxon. The 6mm circular cutter is only 17 grams. I think that puts it in third place. Yeah, third place in those cutter ones. The 8mm wheel cutter, and this was something I wasn't sure if the Proxxon would take, so it was a little leap of faith buying it in the first place, but as you saw it cut very beautifully, is only 26 grams. So there we go. That's my inner nerd and geek satisfied for today anyway. Thank you for watching. You may now go and do something much more interesting instead. I know I'm going to. There may be a video next week, but I'm going to be in Greece. The last of my foreign wood turning travels this year. Maybe I'll do a little live upload from there, a bit about what's been happening rather than a turning and demonstrating or tool testing video, because the chances of me getting something else filmed between now and then pretty minuscule. Right, I'm off for a heavy editing session. See you next time.